podcast.
All right, welcome to this deep dive. We're going deep on Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight.
Oh, yeah.
You know, this film's gone way past just a superhero movie.
Absolutely.
It's a modern classic, and we're going to break down why that is.
Yeah.
For this deep dive, we're using excerpts from a proposed podcast. It's called Gotham Unveiled, The Dark Knight Deep Dive.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, and we're going to look at themes, characters, all the behind-the-scenes stuff. So are you ready to kind of peel back the layers of this masterpiece?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, great.
The Dark Knight went so much further than just your average superhero film. It really digs into these big questions about morality.
Right.
And the tough choices we have to make for what we think is the right thing.
It really makes you think, you know, this proposed podcast,
Yeah.
it really highlights that. They frame The Dark Knight as this exploration of
Yeah.
what do you do when you're caught between two bad options?
Yeah, and that's what makes it so captivating. Back in 2008, most superhero movies were all flash and effects. But Nolan took a totally different approach. He made this gritty, real world. That felt jarring at the time, but I think that's why people loved it so much.
It feels so real, like you're right there in Gotham.
Wow.
And the conflict between Batman and the Joker, it goes way deeper than good versus evil. You know, proposed podcast focuses on that. They say the film challenges us to look at this blurry line between what's right and what's wrong. Can we ever really justify doing bad things for a good reason? It really stays with you.
It does, and that's the genius of the Joker, isn't it? He's not just your typical bad guy. He's chaos personified. He wants to shake everything up. Remember that scene where he just burns all that money? It's a powerful image, showing us how fragile our systems really are.
I mean, the scene where he says, "Why so serious?"
Yeah.
It gives me chills every time.
Yeah.
Like he's letting you in on this secret. Chaos is always there, under the surface,
Right.
just waiting to break out.
Makes you question everything, right?
Yeah.
Is order really possible, or is it just a facade? That's the question the film wants us at.
Exactly. So let's talk characters. This proposed podcast really dives into the acting. And they have this great point about Christian Bale's Batman. They describe him as understated, yet intense. A man burdened by responsibility,
Yeah.
but also driven by this need for redemption.
I think Bale really makes Batman relatable. He's not just the symbol, he's a guy fighting his own demons and struggling with the weight of his choices.
Yeah, you can see it in that scene where he's interrogating the Joker. The rage and desperation in his voice, you feel the toll it's taking on him. He's so human, even though he's dressed as a bat. And then there's Heath Ledger's Joker. A truly iconic performance,
Yeah.
made even more powerful by Ledger's passing. The proposed podcast talks about how Ledger took this character that could have been a cartoon and turned him into this complex, terrifying figure. No surprise he won a posthumous Oscar for it.
I mean, it was a game changer. Ledger balanced perfectly between villain and anti-hero. He makes you question your own moral compass. Even when he's doing terrible things,
Yeah.
there's this twisted logic to it. You almost get drawn in.
You can't look away, even though you should. And the proposed podcast points out that the supporting characters are just as vital.
Oh, totally.
Harvey Dent, Commissioner Gordon, Rachel Dawes, they're not just sidekicks. They each represent a different part of Gotham, different ways of dealing with the chaos the Joker unleashes.
Their fates are so tied to Batman's journey. They become examples of the impossible decisions he has to make. Like Harvey Dent, he starts as the symbol of hope, Gotham's white knight, but he ends up a tragic figure, a victim of the chaos he was fighting against.
It's hard to watch him fall. It really shows you just how fragile order can be. And the film doesn't shy away from showing. Even good intentions can go wrong.
Absolutely. It reminds us that fighting for justice, it's never just black and white. There are shades of gray, compromises, and unintended consequences.
Yeah. You know, the Pros podcast also talks about Nolan's filmmaking.
Yeah.
They highlight his use of practical effects, the detail in the sets, all the real stunts. It makes it feel real.
Right. It's different from a lot of superhero movies. Even today, they rely so much on CGI.
But here, like that scene where the Joker blows up the hospital, they actually blew up a real building.
Oh, no.
The scale of it, the debris, it's just so visceral. You can feel the impact.
It's spectacular, but it also has a purpose. It makes the danger feel real.
Exactly. Like the stakes are incredibly high.
Right.
And it's not just the explosions either. Think about that chase with the Bat Pod. It's so intense. And a lot of that is because they used real vehicles, real stunts. You can see the skill, the risk.
Yeah.
That's something CGI can't really replicate.
You really feel the danger.
Yeah.
And the proposed podcast argues that this attention to detail, this commitment to practical effects, was a huge influence on superhero films after The Dark Knight.
It set a new standard
But yeah.
for realism, for grittiness that a lot of filmmakers tried to follow.
And it went beyond the technical stuff, too.
Right.
It started conversations, debates, even controversy. It made people think about justice, about security, about vigilantism, about the limits of the law.
The proposed podcast describes its cultural impact as immeasurable. It wasn't just a hit movie. It was a phenomenon.
It sparked these discussions about whether the ends justify the means, about how much freedom we give up for safety.
Those questions feel especially relevant now, don't
They
they?
do. Think about the surveillance state today, the debates about privacy.
Right.
These themes are all woven into The Dark Knight.
It's like it predicted some of what we're dealing with now.
In a way, yeah.
And it wasn't just casual talk either. It was studied in schools, referenced in pop culture, even discussed in politics.
It's amazing how one film could have that much reach.
That's the power of great storytelling, right?
It is. It connects with something universal that resonates across cultures and generations.
The Dark Knight did that. In a way, few films have.
It wasn't just entertainment. It reflected our anxieties, our fears, our hopes. It made us face these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us.
The proposed podcast makes that point very clear. They emphasize that The Dark Knight isn't just a movie. It's a cultural artifact that continues to influence us, challenge us.
To make us think,
Yeah.
even now, more than a decade later, the themes of The Dark Knight are still so relevant.
The struggle between order and chaos, the lines between right and wrong, the sacrifices we make for our beliefs.
Those are timeless, universal. We all deal with them in some way.
And the film doesn't give easy answers.
No.
It gives you these moral dilemmas and forces you to wrestle with them, to see different points of view, maybe even question your own values.
It's what makes it so powerful. It doesn't tell you what to think. It lets you think for yourself, wrestle with these tough questions, and reach your own conclusions. It respects the audience's intelligence.
And that's why it stays with you. Long after you've seen it, it makes you think about the choices you'd make if you were in their shoes.
And isn't that what makes a film truly great? When it stays with you, when it keeps the conversation going, when it makes you see the world differently. The Dark Knight does all that and more.
Yeah, it really does make you think. And it makes me think about something they talked about in the proposed podcast, about all the choices Batman makes, all the things he has to sacrifice.
Right, like he's constantly put in these impossible situations.
Exactly. And it got me thinking, if you were Batman facing the Joker and all those impossible choices, where would you draw the line? What would you be willing to give up for the greater good?
That's a big question. That really gets to the core of this film. There's no easy answer, no right or wrong. The film makes you face those gray areas where things aren't so clear.
Right. It's like the film is holding up a mirror, making you ask yourself, what are my limits? What would I compromise? What does it really mean to be a hero?
It makes you think about your own values. The Dark Knight shows us that being a hero isn't just about wearing the costume and fighting villains. It's about making tough choices that sometimes have terrible consequences.
It's messy, complicated, personal, and you see that in how the characters struggle. They're not just fighting bad guys, they're fighting with their own conscience, trying to figure out what's right when the world keeps changing around them.
And that's what makes The Dark Knight stand out. It's not just a superhero movie, it's about what it means to be human. The choices we make in the dark, when we're not sure what's coming next. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, there's still hope, there's still room for courage and compassion.
That's a powerful message. And I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into The Dark Knight.
It's been great exploring this film with you. We hope it's given you some new things to think about, maybe even challenged some of your own views.
Because that's what great art does, right?
It does.
Makes us think, makes us feel, makes us question. The Dark Knight does it all. So if you haven't seen it lately, we encourage you to go back and watch it again, see all the layers, the complexity, the power.
And remember the questions we've talked about today. Where do you draw the line? What would you sacrifice? What does being a hero really mean to you?
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.